Welcome to the Ice Age Sleep Podcast. We're so glad you're here.
Remember to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, have a wonderful podcast.
Okay, let's unpack this. When you think about those huge scientific discoveries, the ones that really redraw the maps of human history, your mind tends to go to these dramatic, remote places.
Right, you picture archaeologists in the desert or digging in these deep, ancient caves somewhere in Europe.
Exactly. Or, the windswept plains of Siberia. Places that just feel epic. Places where you'd expect to find something that changes everything.
And there's this assumption, I think, that monumental evidence comes from monumental effort. That you have to, really wrench these secrets from the earth over years and years of difficult excavation.
But the story we're diving into today just completely flips that script. It's a story about a scientific revolution that didn't start at a dig site or in some high-tech lab. It started in probably the most mundane place you could imagine, a dusty, dark basement in rural Colorado.
It's the ultimate contrast, isn't it? The deep, deep history of the Ice Age found hiding in, of all things, a rusty old toolbox.
It's incredible.
And that contrast, well, that's really what defines the stakes of this deep dive. What we're looking at is the story of a single, highly improbable artifact. And it's basically the only tangible evidence we have of an ancient, completely unknown human population.
A lost lineage, I've heard it called?
That's right. Paleoanthropologists are calling it a lost lineage, or sometimes the ghost population of the deep Ice Age. And this one discovery, it forces us to admit that our human family tree is, well, it's a lot messier and more complicated than we ever really thought.
So our mission today is to trace the journey of this one piece of bone, hidden away for over 40 years, going from this forgotten family secret to the absolute frontier of paleoanthropology. We need to figure out not just what it is, but, what does it tell us about human adaptation, about the Ice Age, and maybe even about what it means to be human?
We're going to look at the morphology, the physical data. We'll talk about the challenge it presents to our neat evolutionary classifications. And maybe most importantly, we'll look at the silent, moving testimony it gives about the social bonds of a people we never even knew existed.
And this journey, it really does begin so far from any university or museum. It starts with a secret kept for more than 4 decades by a man named John Mitchell.
He was a war veteran, lived a very quiet life in a small house in Colorado, far from, any of the major archaeological hubs.
And the sources, they really paint this picture of intentional secrecy, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He had this object, this piece of deep, deep history, and he kept it carefully wrapped in an old cloth. And he stored it inside this heavy, rusty toolbox in his basement.
History guarding history.
Exactly, just sitting there, among all the other forgotten things in a normal basement, completely silent.
He was this accidental historian, completely unwitting, and what makes it so fascinating is we have no idea where it came from. The provenance is a total blank.
Right. Whenever anyone might have asked about it, he just wouldn't speak of it. The sources say he'd just deflect with this brief, quiet smile, as if he was holding on to this complicated truth that maybe he didn't even fully understand himself.
It creates this huge vacuum of knowledge, doesn't it? How did he get it?
That's the million-dollar question. Was it something he picked up during his wartime service? Maybe from some obscure site overseas?
Or maybe he just found it locally, in a riverbed or an old mine.
Could be. Or maybe on his travels somewhere in the American West or even further north. We just don't know. And that mystery, the mystery of John Mitchell himself, is now a permanent part of this fossil's legacy.
And all that mystery was just locked away in the most anticlimactic place, a toolbox. But that silence was finally broken after Mitchell passed away at the age of 82.
And this is really the moment the deep past finally crashes into the present. His granddaughter was tasked with that. The really difficult job of cleaning out his house, his possessions. And she stumbled upon that forgotten box.
You have to imagine that moment. 40 years of silence, just culminating right there. She opens it, pulls out this object wrapped in cloth. And it's heavy, it's cold, and it feels strange in her hands.
The sources say she knew right away it wasn't just a rock or a piece of petrified wood.
Right, she described the texture, the weight.
Yeah, she called it something living transformed by time. It's that specific density, the feeling that it was once organic, but has gone through this incredible transformation. You can almost feel the millennia in it.
That intuitive feeling that she was holding something important, something that needed answers.
Exactly. So she reached out, she called the specialists from the University of Colorado.
And can you just picture that scene? These leading experts in their field walking into a normal suburban house down the basement stairs, and they're confronted with something that belongs in a museum under climate-controlled glass.
The reaction was, well, it was profound shock, but also instant recognition. They knew they weren't looking at just some interesting rock. The source material says the silence just took over the environment,
I can believe it.
and they identified it immediately. A tibia, a shin bone.
And then came the big realization, the one that changed everything.
It was human.
Not a bear, not a mammoth, which you might expect from the Ice Age in that area.
No, human. But, and this is the absolute core of the discovery, it was profoundly structurally different from any modern Homo sapiens bone they had ever seen.
That quiet in that Colorado basement must have felt immense, like geological time just suddenly colliding with the present day.
And once that initial shock started to wear off, well, then the science began, the real work. The specialists took it back to the lab and started running comprehensive analyses, scans, measurements, all the protocols. The goal is to figure out what this single bone could tell them about the person it belonged to.
But wait a minute, we find robust ancient human bones all the time. What was it specifically, quantitatively that made this one so different? Couldn't it have just been a particularly large, strong Homo sapiens from an early population?
And that's the critical distinction. It wasn't just about size. The morphology, the detailed shape, and the internal structure, it told a story that was just utterly unique. The data wasn't just suggesting strength. It was suggesting a completely different engineering profile.
Okay.
And the very first thing that stood out was its exceptional density.
How do you even measure density in a fossil that old?
Well, they used non-destructive methods, things like high-resolution CT scanning, microarchitecture analysis. They can look at the thickness of the cortical bone, the outer wall, and the structure of the spongy bone inside. And then they compare those metrics against thousands of known examples from other populations.
And in this case?
In this case, compared to modern humans, and even compared to other robust Ice Age hominids like Neanderthals, the bone mass of this tibia was astronomically high.
So that density, it's a direct indicator of strength, of resistance to stress.
Exactly. If your bone is that much denser than the modern average, it means it can withstand significantly more force, more impact, more strain. And this incredible density lined up perfectly with what they saw on the surface, the muscle attachment sites.
The little ridges on the bone where muscles connect.
Right. And on this tibia, those ridges and scars were so exaggerated, so pronounced, it suggested a level of musculature and physical power that the reports described as almost inhuman.
So this was a person whose entire life was just this constant, high-impact physical effort.
Sustained effort, yes.
So the density tells us about the engineering, but what about the shape, the length and thickness of the tibia? What does that tell us about how they lived and survived?
That leads directly to what we call the cold adaptation profile. See, the tibia wasn't just dense, it was also relatively short and very thick through the main shaft. And this is a classic physiological trait we see in animals and humans adapted to extreme cold. It's related to something called Bergmann's and Allen's rules. In cold climates, organisms evolve to have more mass relative to their surface area. It helps to minimize heat loss.
So short, thick limbs are basically the physical signature of someone who is built for survival in constant sub-zero temperatures.
Precisely. Their very structure screamed, "I am built for ice." This was an individual physically tuned for life in the unrelenting cold of the glacial era.
And it wasn't just about staying warm, was it? It was also about movement.
Right. Think about what it takes to walk across thick, uneven ice or wade through deep snow for hours every day. Short, powerful legs give you more stable leverage. They're better for that kind of long-distance, high-impact trekking over brutal terrain.
And that powerful structure was also backed up by evidence of a truly staggering life of physical demand. The experts looked even closer, didn't they, at the microfractures?
Yes, the microfractures. And these weren't from a single big injury. These were countless tiny little stress points and breaks, things you can only see under high magnification.
The signature of a body just used to its absolute limit.
To the extreme, yes. They told a story of a life of grinding, relentless motion, year after year after year.
So what the sources seem to be saying is that this wasn't just a physical adaptation, it was an adaptation for constant motion, a walking marathon every single day.
The specialists were actually able to extrapolate a bit from the data. They estimated that this individual, and likely their entire population, probably walked dozens of kilometers every single day.
Every day.
Every day. Their world offered no rest. Their whole existence was a high-stakes search for food, for shelter, for safety. They were constantly tracking megafauna, moving to new territories.
It puts it in perspective. Before agriculture, before you could settle down, your survival depended entirely on your mobility.
It did. And every ounce of that bone density, all that muscle mass, was necessary fuel for that perpetual survival marathon. This one tibia, it's a testament to an evolutionary path that specialized in absolute, unrelenting endurance in the deepest cold imaginable.
Which is where this discovery really starts to get complicated. It's not just about physiology anymore. It becomes this profound evolutionary riddle.
Exactly, because the moment the scientists had all this metric data, they ran into a huge classification challenge.
They could place it in the Ice Age. They knew it was adapted for the cold, but it just didn't fit into any of the known boxes for humans of that era.
That's right. When you find an Ice Age hominid, you're generally expecting one of three major players on the world stage: Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or Denisovans.
And so they started comparing it, trying to find a match.
Exhaustively. And they were able to rule them out, one by one.
So what were the specific traits that let them do that? I mean, how could they be so sure it wasn't just an unusual Neanderthal, for example? They were also cold-adapted and robust.
They were, but the geometry of this tibia was just off. Neanderthal tibias have a very specific bowing to them, a certain kind of torsion or twisting to handle their body mechanics. This bone didn't have that. The articulation points, where the bone meets the knee and the ankle and the cross-sectional shape, it was all distinctly different.
So even the ratios were wrong.
The robusticity indices, yeah. They confirmed it was just too specialized, but in a different way. It didn't fit within the known range of Neanderthal variation. It was a clear morphological exclusion.
So not a known cold-adapted human, something else entirely. That suggests a new parallel branch on our family tree. I mean, that is a monumental claim to make from one bone.
It is. The structure was completely baffling. One of the researchers described it as something in between or completely different.
Yeah.
It points to a lineage that must have diverged much earlier and then specialized heavily, probably living in complete isolation for millennia, maybe in the far reaches of Beringia or some other unglaciated refuge.
Which completely disrupts the story of how humans first came to the Americas.
It throws a massive wrench in the works.
Because the prevailing theories were all about waves of Homo sapiens migration, right?
Right. Either an early coastal migration or a later one through an interior ice-free corridor. But both theories focused exclusively on our direct ancestors. This tibia implies there was a non-sapiens population present in the Americas, or at least in the extreme north, at a time we never expected.
So multiple previously unknown waves of hominids moving out of Eurasia.
It certainly suggests that possibility.
In a situation like this, the one thing you'd want, the golden key, would be DNA.
Of course.
But the sources are clear on this point. The DNA quest failed. That must have been a huge blow.
It was a painful, frustrating reality for the research team. They used every advanced technique available, but the material was just too deteriorated, too old, too exposed.
So the constant freezing and thawing just destroyed the cells.
It shreds the cellular structure, yeah. It makes getting any kind of clean, long DNA sequence practically impossible. So without that genetic signature, we can't definitively place them on the map next to us, Neanderthals and Denisovans.
Yeah.
We're left guessing.
Which means the bone's physical structure, the morphology, has to carry the entire weight of their story.
Precisely. It alone has to confirm that this belonged to a distinct, unknown human population.
And we're left to use those physical details to try and build a picture of this ghost population.
And the picture that emerges is one of incredible resistance. Highly muscular people, completely specialized for moving across ice and snow, survivors in the most absolute sense.
And given those extreme conditions, that kind of specialization must have required a very specific kind of social structure, too.
Absolutely. They couldn't have afforded large, complex communities. Survival would have depended on small, efficient, cohesive units.
How small are we talking?
The thinking is that their groups were likely very small, maybe 10 or 15 people max. And in a group that tiny, the loss of even one capable adult, a hunter, a toolmaker, a caregiver, that would have been an immediate existential threat to everyone.
It makes every single person, as you said, vital for the survival of the collective.
The stakes are just exponentially higher. An injury isn't just a personal medical crisis. It's a crisis that endangers the future of the entire group.
And that profound reality, that understanding, it leads us directly to the most compelling, the most human detail on that entire bone.
Right. This is where the story shifts, because up to now we've been talking about bone density, physical stress, Cold adaptation.
Yeah.
It's pure biology. But the most important story this tibia tells is about something else entirely. It's about complex social behavior. This is the real aha moment, the detail that transforms this ghost lineage from a set of statistics into a truly human story.
And that moment came when the scientists focused their scanners on the middle of the tibia shaft. They found an ancient but perfectly healed fracture. Can you describe that injury? I mean, what would a broken shin bone have meant in their world?
A death sentence. A mid-shaft fracture like this one, it's an absolute death sentence in the Ice Age.
Because of the immobilization.
Completely. This individual would have been totally unable to walk, to move, for months, maybe 3 to 6 months for a bone to fuse properly. Without any modern medicine, no antibiotics, no sterile settings, no real pain management, the chances of even surviving the initial infection, let alone the long period of inactivity, are almost zero.
In that environment, you instantly become a burden. You can't hunt, you can't help move camp, you can't even defend yourself. Survival depends on contribution.
And yet, the analysis showed the miracle. The fracture was, as the report says, completely cicatrizata. It was completely healed, the bone had reformed, fused correctly, and allowed this person to live on, to walk again.
So the physical fact of the healing is the undeniable proof of something much bigger.
It's the evidence of communal compassion.
The survival is the physical proof, but the healing is the social proof.
Exactly. That fracture could only have healed under one condition, if others cared for them. This is the massive implication of care, and it's definitive. It required sustained, deliberate intervention from the rest of the group.
They made a conscious decision not to abandon this person.
A decision that would have placed a crushing burden on their own chances of survival.
I mean, just think about the effort involved. That's altruism on a huge scale. Someone had to physically carry this person when the group needed to move. Someone had to share their own scarce food.
And the entire group had to take on increased risk, protecting this vulnerable member from predators for months and months, just waiting for that bone to knit back together.
It's so much more than just the cooperation you'd need for a hunt. This is empathy. This is profound social complexity.
It proves that even in the face of immense hardship, constant cold, hunger, the threat of extinction, they prioritize the life of an incapacitated member of their community.
And this find, it really puts them on the map of compassion, doesn't it? We have evidence of care in Neanderthals, like the famous Old Man of Shanidar. But to find such clear, undeniable proof in a completely unknown hominid group it's just breathtaking.
It absolutely redefines our timeline of human compassion. The source material calls that scar on the bone not just a medical finding, but a silent mark of extraordinary care, a deep social bond, a mark of empathy in a brutal world.
It's incredible. They weren't just surviving with muscle and bone density. They were building a society defined by the compassion they showed to their weakest members.
That is a powerful, powerful message locked inside a single fossil.
But that discovery, as amazing as it is, it just leads to the next, maybe even bigger question.
The most perplexing question of all, yes.
If they were so resilient, so well adapted, and so compassionate, where are the rest of them?
Where are all the other fossils? Why do we only have this one piece, found by chance in a toolbox?
It's this great fragmented story. We have one beautiful detailed chapter, but the rest of the book is missing.
And the scientific community has been exploring several theories to try and explain this vanishing act.
Some fascinating and some are quite tragic.
The most accepted theory is what's called the preservation challenge. The idea is that this population probably lived in regions that were so cold, so isolated, deep in the Beringian ice fields maybe, that bone preservation was just next to impossible.
Right. We forget that fossilization needs very specific conditions. You need a stable environment, mineral-rich sediment.
Exactly. In permafrost regions, bone is just constantly destroyed. It gets ground up by glacial movement, shattered by freeze-thaw cycles. If they were a nomadic people always moving, their dead would have been scattered across these vast, inhospitable landscapes that actively destroy remains instead of preserving them.
So the fact that this one single piece survived is a statistical miracle.
A complete anomaly, yes. It must have ended up in some unique, dry little pocket of sediment that protected it against all odds.
Then there's the more unsettling possibility. Climate change extinction. They were hyper-specialized survivors, but maybe that specialization was ultimately their weakness.
We know the end of the last ice age wasn't a smooth, gradual warming. It involved very dramatic, very rapid climate shifts.
Yeah.
And those shifts could be devastating for a species that's highly specialized.
So if this ghost population was tuned for a very narrow, deep, cold ecological niche,
That niche could have vanished from under their feet in just a few decades.
a sudden warming trend could have wiped out their main food sources, the megafauna. Or maybe their own adaptations became a disadvantage.
It's a real possibility. Those short, powerful limbs, perfect for ice, might have been a handicap in warmer, wetter, more forested terrain. Hyperspecialization is a double-edged sword. It lets you thrive in one environment, but it makes you incredibly vulnerable when that environment disappears.
So they might have just vanished right as the ice receded.
Disappeared into the silent void, yes.
And the last theory, the optimistic one.
The hopeful one, perhaps? The unfound trails. The idea that we just haven't looked in the right places yet.
I mean, the Ice Age world was immense.
Immense, and still largely unexplored. There are vast stretches of North America and Beringia that are either inaccessible or just haven't been systematically surveyed. So it's entirely plausible that a settlement, maybe even a burial site, is preserved out there somewhere, just waiting to be discovered.
But regardless of why they vanished, the impact of this one discovery is already profound.
It solidified this idea of a lost lineage. A people who walked the snow, faced giant beasts, mastered the deepest cold, and then just disappeared without a trace.
It's a somber thought, isn't it?
It's a powerful realization that entire peoples existed, survived conditions we can barely imagine, built complex societies based on empathy, and then vanished without name. Their whole history, their struggles, their capacity for care, all of it distilled into one incredibly dense, scarred shin bone.
And when we circle back to the very beginning of this deep dive, the irony of where it was found just becomes so much more poignant. John Mitchell, this war veteran, lived out his life as the secret guardian of this monumental piece of human history. His basement wasn't just a basement. It was an unwitting, hidden museum.
He lived his life day in and day out, probably never fully grasping the scale of the past that was resting just one floor beneath him. It just underscores that truth, that history, the real story of our origins, isn't always found in famous, designated sites. Sometimes it's just waiting, hidden in a forgotten corner of our own world.
And today, the bone is safe. It's in a lab, being analyzed by the most sophisticated equipment we have. Lasers, scanners, spectrometers. Scientists are still trying to wrench more answers from it, as one report put it.
Yeah.
Trying to refine the date, understand their diet through isotopes.
And maybe, just maybe, with some future technology, find a tiny fragment of protein or DNA that previous attempts couldn't recover.
But the core takeaway for you, for the listener, is already so clear.
It is. This single piece of evidence proves that the past is so much more complex, more fragmented, and more surprising than we ever imagined. We thought we had a rough sketch of the human family tree in the Ice Age. This tibia proves we missed an entire successful branch.
A branch that excelled not just in physical resilience, but in profound social care.
And the enduring lesson is that history, the kind that rewrites the textbooks, is often found in the most improbable of places. We just have to keep our eyes open.
Even in the dusty quiet of an old basement.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to contemplate. Consider the silent echo of that bone. Resting in darkness for decades, holding a story of extreme survival, of profound human connection. And ask yourself, what other great chapters of our history, what other lost lineages are out there right now? Hidden, perhaps, wrapped in an old cloth in a forgotten box, just waiting patiently for someone to finally listen to their silent testimony.